And welcome everybody to another episode of Pulse of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung. I will be joined later by Eric Wiedeke. I may be joined later also by Coach Eric Smith. Ron Caniff is not feeling well today, so we wish him a speedy and quick recovery. We are still waiting to hear from Duke, who is still in North Carolina. We are hoping that he will be back soon as well. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, the news about Tua Tagovailoa, he's going to be coming back shortly. And now I officially welcome Eric Wiedeke into the show. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're just setting the stage, as it were, as the question is laid out for this title of the show. Can the Dolphins survive until Tua's return? Now, we did hear recently from Mike McDaniel that there is this is the first official confirmation that the Dolphins do expect Tua to come back and play. Now, whether that happens against the Arizona Cardinals or not, we have yet to be seen on that, but hopefully that is what is going to take place, because I don't know how much longer Miami, like they got by New England, but I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to survive with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, even if some other players start coming back. Like, I know that we're still waiting to hear from Isaiah Wynn. We don't know where he is. We're still waiting to hear back from Bradley Chubb. We're hoping that he comes back at some point. That would definitely help with the Jalen Phillips situation, since he's no longer going to be playing. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're going to get into all of that, but before we get too much further into it, just want to go ahead and mention, as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at jerseys305.com.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
Once again, that's jerseys305.com. Use that promo code 5. You get 10% off your order for any vintage memorabilia that happens to be on that site. All right, so we've already discussed everything that we saw during the bye week, which is a whole lot of nothing, but we were able to reflect on what we had in the season so far. So obviously things have not gone the way that the Miami Dolphins have wanted it to. Their rivals in the AFC East are trying to make some moves to get better, and we'll address that as well. The Buffalo Bills traded for Amari Cooper, basically a trade pick swap, I believe, of third rounders. And they got Amari Cooper out of the deal. So that's going to help Buffalo. They've, as Alfredo Arteaga of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast mentioned, they're basically doubling down on what they already do very well. So Amari Cooper adds some extra firepower to that offense. As far as the Jets go, I'm nowhere near as concerned per se about Devontae Adams going back to his old buddy Aaron Rodgers, because we've already seen what the Packers looked like when all those players were there. We've already seen what the Packers looked like with Nathaniel Hackett. So I'm not particularly concerned about putting Hackett and 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers and 32-year-old Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard and all those guys all over again.
Does the fact that Hackett is no longer calling the plays make any difference to you?
Yeah, he's there. And you know that Aaron Rodgers is I said it at work unironically today, and we're welcoming Coach Eric Smith into the show. I said it very unironically, and I mean this with all my heart and soul. Aaron Rodgers is not only the quarterback, he is also the head coach, he is the GM, and he is the de facto owner of the New York Jets until the day he decides he no longer wants to be. Everything that has happened, you can easily point back and say, yeah, this probably has something to do with Aaron Rodgers wanting something, because Why else? Like Devontae Adams was basically suddenly miraculously he's healthy. I'm sure that Aaron Rodgers has been pushing at Joe Douglas and saying, go get my guy, please. Not that he hasn't already gotten all of his other guys leading up to this point. So that's besides the point. Then you have Hackett, who we already know for a fact that he and Aaron Rodgers are just wonderful friends. We know for a fact that, well, not for a fact, but we can easily speculate that Aaron Rodgers was not a fan of Robert Saleh, and the fact that one day after talking to Aaron Rodgers, Robert Saleh gets kicked out the building. That's not a coincidence, man. Aaron Rodgers has been telling the Jets ownership, this is what you're going to do. You're going to make me happy even if it kills you. And so I'm not worried about Devontae Adams on the Jets. You already had so many weapons to begin with. Now, is the argument, oh, well, you have so many weapons, Aaron Rodgers is never going to run out of places to throw the football? You had Garrett Wilson there already. Just like the same argument that we had as far as what the Dolphins situation supposedly was. There's only so many footballs to go around. I mean, the same thing happens here. Are you going to force the ball to Devontae Adams and take the ball away from Garrett Wilson? I mean, that doesn't seem like a net positive. Garrett Wilson is younger. Garrett Wilson has a higher upside. Devontae Adams is 32. Well, regardless of how good he is and what he can be, and did Coach Eric get kicked out of the show? Or did he kick himself out the show? Oh, he's having
connected. I didn't kick him. I think he dropped out on his own.
And Coach Eric is letting me know that he's trying to get some film up for us to look at together. So as always, we appreciate Coach Eric and Hussam Patel with their film reviews. So if we have the opportunity to take a look at something, we'll absolutely take it. I appreciate Coach Eric for giving me the heads up about having it being on there. So we will look forward to that shortly. But again, I'm more concerned about the Bills than I am about the Jets, even with them adding Aaron Rodgers' best friends. Like the only thing that they're missing, and I'm gonna look at this up just to be absolutely sure, because I feel like at this point I need to make sure. Okay, so Mercedes Lewis is with the Bears right now. He's not with the Jets. I just needed to double check on that.
What's funny is I knew that's who you were checking for before you even said his name.
Oh, how do you know I wasn't looking up Randall Cobb?
No, because Mercedes Lewis, I mean, he's been in the league since like 2005, dude. There's only one other guy that's been around pretty much as long as Aaron Rodgers has at this point.
Cobb. Seriously, I think he finally retired.
Randall Cobb was like the 2011 draft. He was like 5-6 years after Rodgers.
But he's saying he's in the Wikipedia says former wide receiver, so he's no longer.
Cobb retired a couple of years back.
But how do you know? Like, how do you know that Aaron Rodgers is not on the phone right now saying, "Hey, I'm getting the band back together. You want to come back to the Jets?" And then all Aaron Rodgers has to do is walk up to Joe Douglas's office. He doesn't even have to knock. He just bangs the door open. Like, boom, here I am. Hey, I just called my buddy Randall. He wants to come back and play. You're going to sign him now. And Joe Douglas is going to be like, yes, master, because whatever Aaron Rodgers says goes. So, not to put too fine a point on it, I'm not even a little bit concerned about the Jets trading for Devontae Adams at this point.
I gotta disagree just a little bit, because I think that the Jets offense played a pretty good game against Buffalo this week, despite losing. It was probably the best Aaron Rodgers has looked all year this year. Ooh. And, you look at what the Jets offense was before this deal, it kind of was Garrett Wilson and then insert random wide receiver here. There wasn't really this bountiful treasure trove of weapons. It was really just Garrett Wilson. And then I guess, Allen Lazard kind of by default. They added Mike Williams, but that really kind of blew up in their face this year, although he really wasn't, that wasn't really a super high risk deal. It just gives them another option offensively to where Garrett Wilson doesn't have to get 22 targets like he got in London last week. So while I don't think Aaron Rodgers is what he used to be, I think Aaron Rodgers is firmly in the average quarterback category at this point, maybe a little bit above average, kind of in that 12th to 15th best in the league range at this point. it does matter, because if you go back to those teams in Green Bay, all respect to Aaron Jones, he's a really good runner. The running back room in New York is also better. He's not Breece Hall. Braylon Allen, if the Jets ever decide that they want to properly use him, and I hope they never come to that conclusion, is a really good second running back for them. But where I do agree with you is I don't think people are talking enough about the Amari Cooper to Buffalo side of this. Amari Cooper put up 1,200 yards last year in Cleveland. Having the ball thrown to him by Deshaun Watson, and no disrespect to him, he's been really good the last couple of years as a backup quarterback, Joe Flacco. But
we'll talk about him.
Yeah.
We'll talk about him.
Yeah. He's gone from that as his quarterback play to now Josh Allen. And he gives Buffalo a real number one reliable option in the receiving game. And one that isn't necessarily as loud about needing his targets as the last guy that was the number one wide receiver in Buffalo. So that's what really kind of, moves me as far as the AFC East goes, because I don't think at this point it's about can the Miami Dolphins survive until Tua's return. I think, based on the reports we've been hearing, I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I would honestly be surprised if he's not starting against Arizona at this point. As far as Tua goes, I think the better question is now, can the Miami Dolphins survive, in this new AFC East? Can they keep pace with the two teams that are also in contention to make the playoffs in the division? Because I don't know. I hope it's the case, but I don't know for a fact that Tua is just going to, come in and be early 2023. I don't know if he's got a post-concussion run like he did in 2022, where he just went crazy for 5 games right after coming off the
Buffalo concussion, or I should say the Cincinnati one.
Yeah, off of injured reserve. So I don't know if that's the case. I almost tend to think that there might be a little bit more of a kind of adjustment period with Tua, because Odell's in this offense now, because Jonnu Smith is still a guy that he doesn't have the greatest chemistry with at this point, because maybe and hopefully Mike McDaniel wants to do things just a smidge differently. So, I think that's the better question here, is because I think you're only really going to have to survive without Tua for one more game. But from then on, it's Arizona, it's New England, it's the Rams. Those are 3 games right after this Colts game that if Tua comes back, the Dolphins have to get all 3 of those games. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Those are 3 games that they have to win. And it's they're fortunate that the rest of the AFC is kind of but that they're in this position. But I think that it starts with winning this game against Indy, and then the next 3, when Tua comes back, become must-win games. Because if you're sitting at 6-3 after the next 4 weeks, I think you're feeling pretty good about where the Dolphins are.
All right, Coach, I want to go ahead and get you in here. Thoughts on the whole AFC East shakeup here? I already went through my long attempt at comedy with the whole Aaron Rodgers New York Jets rant that I went on, but I mean, I do mean what I say sincerely. Aaron Rodgers is running that franchise. I don't care what anybody says. But what are your thoughts right now on the AFC East shakeup? Is that something that you're concerned about, or are you just kind of looking at it and being like, it doesn't help, but it doesn't really hurt anything at this point either?
Yeah, I think the Jets are a complete dumpster fire. Like, I felt like, when you have a player that's basically running the team, that's really never worked out, especially when it's not guys that he's played with, last year that he's bringing in. When he came into Green Bay, he had the benefit of, had the talent that was there already. And as guys are coming in, they're all learning the same system. And then take that player to a new team and trying to get everybody up to speed, doing what the quarterback wants to do versus an offensive system. And that just never really works out. So nothing the Jets can do are really going to do anything to worry me about them. I mean, of course, Aaron Rodgers can still have those crazy games here or there, but in terms of them being a real threat in the AFC picture, I just don't see that. As far as the Bills getting Amari Cooper, that one worries me a little more. I texted a friend of mine that's that I trust in terms of his opinion, who is a Cleveland Browns fan, and I'm like, hey, does this move do anything for the Bills? Because I haven't watched Amari Cooper play in years, really, and his response was, yeah, if he gets the right quarterback, then he can do some damage. And I'm thinking, well, that's great, just what Josh Allen needs, a legitimate wide receiver. I mean, I think that the rookie out of Florida State has been doing pretty well for them, but now if that becomes their second or third option behind Shakir also, that makes them more dangerous. Their tight ends really, I don't think, have put up the numbers that they kind of expected to get from those two. So to add another receiving threat to an already good team, I think that does make them better. Whether it moves the needle greatly, I don't think so, because the Bills were a more physical, a more disciplined team than us. So it doesn't change any of that. It just gives them one more receiver for Allen. So I think that one makes Buffalo better than what the Devontae Adams move to the Jets does for the Jets.
And I know that you were trying to get some film up, but I guess it wasn't functioning here. So we'll just move past that. Maybe next time, folks. So let's actually talk about the Dolphins and the Colts here. So the running consensus right now is that the Miami Dolphins are going to be getting Anthony Richardson and not Joe Flacco. Now, I know everybody, Eric, for those who are wondering, for those who are watching on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed and don't have any visual, Eric just put up his hands in a thank you God gesture, because Joe Flacco in his career has been notorious as a Dolphins killer. But with that being said, I wanted to go ahead and highlight this, because at first I thought the same thing, but then I went ahead and I actually looked at his record. Joe Flacco throughout his career is 6-3 against Miami. That in and of itself, in a vacuum, is, of course, it's a fantastic record. But here's what needs to be addressed here. Joe Flacco, in his first 6 games against Miami, all were in Baltimore: 2008, 2010, 2013, 2014, 2016, 2017. Joe Flacco beat us. In the 3 matchups since then, all with the Jets, I might add, Joe Flacco lost, and lost. And by the way, he wasn't particularly great in any of those games. In fact, he was arguably god-awful against Miami in those last 3 matchups. So the days of Joe Flacco being the Dolphin killer, personally, I feel like that's gone. I don't think he's that guy anymore. I think that was more about Baltimore than it was about Flacco, because as soon as Flacco got to the Jets, it didn't matter anymore. Flacco wasn't doing anything to us. The Jets were just so bad. Maybe you could argue that the Ravens were just that good. So Flacco just happened to be the quarterback that we were playing that day. So now it does bear the question, because Anthony Richardson obviously has a lot of athleticism. He has a lot of incredible, raw, pure physical talent that Joe Flacco no longer has at his age. So now, knowing what I just laid out for you guys, do you still feel like Joe Flacco would have been the worst option for Miami to face, or maybe now it's like, second thoughts?
Yeah, well, so my thing with Joe Flacco was never, here's Joe Flacco, the Dolphins killer. I always kind of personally associated that with the Ravens and more of their kind of smash mouth, culture as a football team coming in and just bullying the Dolphins. That's kind of more so what I associated it with. It's less about Joe Flacco and it's more about Anthony Richardson. I mean, we're talking about a guy this year who is completing almost bang on 50% of his passes. He's got twice as many interceptions as touchdowns. I think that the answer is pretty simple for the Dolphins, and it's to force Anthony Richardson to play quarterback. Not be an athlete playing quarterback, but play quarterback. Sit in the pocket, really, really scan the field, pat the ball a couple times and pick apart the defense. And I don't know if he's got the accuracy yet to really do that. He's very reminiscent of a really young Josh Allen. Not the Josh Allen that we know now, but Josh Allen in his first year or two in the league when, quite frankly, the jury was out on him. People were we think of Josh Allen now as this MVP candidate guy, but that was not the opinion of Josh Allen in year 1 and 2 in Buffalo. And so I think that Joe Flacco just operates that offense at a higher level. The ceiling may not be as high as what it can be with Anthony Richardson, but I think that the floor is just so much higher with a guy like a Joe Flacco, to where that's what really kind of worried me more than anything. Is in his last couple of years, Joe Flacco has been a really capable quarterback in Cleveland. And even what he showed in Indianapolis, he's been good the last 2 years. Anthony Richardson, not so much. And this is his first game coming back from injury. We don't know. We talk about, is there going to be any rust with Tua? How much rust is there going to be with Anthony Richardson? So that's personally where I was coming from with wanting it to be Joe Flacco over Anthony Richardson. It wasn't necessarily about Joe Flacco. It was more so about Anthony Richardson and his penance for turning the ball over, giving the opposing team extra possessions. I think that the Dolphins can just take more advantage of that in this particular ballgame.
I will say, he signed a 1-year deal with the Colts. If he decides he doesn't want to retire yet, I would absolutely not mind having Joe Flacco as Miami's backup quarterback.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty good, man, right? I'm telling you.
I'll say this. I trust this vintage aged wine version of Joe Flacco a heck of a lot more than I do Skylar Thompson or Mike White or even Tyler Huntley. I mean, I'll say this. I'll say that the jury's out for me on Huntley if he gets more time to learn the offense. He did better in his second week in it than he did the first week. And now he's had 2 weeks to continue to study the playbook. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there with Huntley. We'll see. But if I had to choose, I'd probably go with Flacco as the backup next season if Miami decides they don't want to draft a quarterback within the first 3 rounds of the draft, which I still don't think that they're going to be willing to do. Coach, so we've gone over the quarterback situation with Anthony Richardson, with Joe Flacco. I know that the Dolphins are not going to be facing one of the Indianapolis Colts' main people. I don't think Jonathan Taylor is going to be ready to come back for a little bit. So he's hoping to return to practice this week, but that's not saying a whole lot right now. Jonathan Taylor has proven that as talented as he is, he also has a severe issue with the injury bug. What are the chances, do you think, that Jonathan Taylor comes in and adds the extra bit of offense that this offense actually needs for Indianapolis?
I mean, just like we talked about with Tua, just like we talked about with Anthony Richardson, like when these guys are coming off of injuries, a lot of times there's an adjustment period there. So him just coming off of injury, I don't think, we're going to get the Jonathan Taylor, I don't think we're going to get peak Jonathan Taylor coming off of injury that we would have had he been playing all this time this year. So, if he plays, for me, that's not a big jump in Indianapolis's running game in my opinion. Is it another piece? Is it another, back in the stable that they can use? Absolutely. And, maybe he does come back at 100%. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back and ends up getting eased back into action and doesn't, come in being the 25-30 carry guy that he, was at times before. So I don't see that one being a huge difference maker in the game. I think that Miami's defense has been pretty good against the run, with a few, the big plays here and there, but they've been pretty consistent with being able to stand up with that stuff. So I don't expect this to be a game where Jonathan Taylor comes back and he's a 120, 130 yard performance, and that's why we would lose the game. So for me, that's not, it doesn't move the needle a whole lot for me.
All right, so now let's talk about the Dolphins offense. So obviously Tyler Huntley, this is going to be his third week starting, his fourth week being part of the offense. Tyreek has had a week to kind of get himself back together. Jalen Waddle has had a week to get himself together. Odell Beckham, I'm hoping, is spending a lot more time running his routes and actually getting ready for what is ahead. And Huntley and Beckham already know how to play together. It's not a question of whether or not they can. They know each other by now. It's just, I don't know if there's enough time for Beckham to get attributed to this offense yet. Speaking of players on this offense, as far as I am aware, I don't think we have heard anything recently on Devon Achane. Last thing we heard, he was going to be, he was still dealing with a concussion. We have not, he's been making progress in the concussion protocol. Apparently he was seen at practice in a red non-contact jersey. Raheem Mostert, fortunately, came back in a big way last time the Dolphins played, and he has also had a week off to rest up. And I'm sure Eric is very happy about this. Eric with the W. He's very happy to see Jalen Wright starting to make some headway here. We made the point during the post game that it looked like Jay Ajayi had come back to town in a weird way. So just the guy who just keeps his legs churning beyond any other circumstance. Like, I appreciate that about him. I like that about him. In a weird sort of way, I'd hate to harken back to this, but he's Jalen Wright is turning out to be what Kalen Ballage was supposed to be. You remember Kalen Ballage? He was supposed to be the team's next Jay Ajayi. He was supposed to be that guy, and he wasn't. And somehow these are the moments that, as much as we criticize Chris Grier for some of the decisions that he's made, it's things like this one. He actually managed to get something for Kalen Ballage. Like, how many GMs do you know that can even get a bag of chips for somebody who had literally accomplished nothing since his time being in Miami? It's like zero things. Kalen Ballage did almost zero things with the Dolphins, and Chris Grier got a 7th round pick out of that. So that's the kind of thing that not many GMs can accomplish. So that's why when we talk about firing Chris Grier, punishing Chris Grier for the decisions that he's made, I get it. I understand. I'm pissed off about the offensive line, and I know Coach Sherrick is going to fight me until the day I die on that. But Chris Grier still makes a lot of trades that just kind of be like, how the heck did you pull that off? But so let's go ahead and we'll get into the running back position now, because Devon Achane I'm going to say he's not going to play. That's my official prediction, that he won't play.
I wouldn't be too worried about that. I feel like when a team is on a bye week, that you typically don't see players progress to that stuff. And it's the same idea with Tua. Like, we haven't seen anything saying that Tua is no longer in the concussion protocol. And I think that Mike McDaniel kind of said something about that as well, that, there's no benefit to pushing them through the protocol until they're, ready to do that. I think that's why we, didn't hear that Achane was out of concussion protocol during the first week of the bye week. But now that we're into the second week of it, now he's in the red jersey, so he's in the non-contact phase of it, which means that he's pretty close to being full contact and being able to play. So I wouldn't read too much into that, the same way that I wouldn't read a whole lot into not hearing that Tua is cleared from the concussion, because there's no benefit to doing that before they were to come off of IR, before they were get to the second week of the bye week. So I would expect Achane to play this week.
Eric, where's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Barry Jackson put out a very good article kind of in the Herald about kind of what Tua's next steps to be cleared from his concussion are, and based off of what the protocol says, Devon Achane is pretty far along in the protocol, if I had to guess. Just being on the field and even in a non-contact capacity. So I think that the chances are that he will play on Sunday. Although personally, I think Devon Achane's best position in this offense has suddenly shifted a little bit now.
Yeah.
To where I wouldn't, strictly even classify him as a running back at this point. I hate to use the term because it's been stigmatized so much, but he really is kind of the ultimate gadget player, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He's a guy that you can give 10 to 12 touches a game, that can take it all the way on any of those touches. And I think using him kind of flexed out, whether it's, out wide or in the slot, and then kind of being able to use Mostert and use Wright to kind of take on that burden in the running game. I think that's when Devon Achane was pigeonholed, is when he had to be the guy taking 20 carries a game, because that's just not what he's best at. And so now I think that Mike McDaniel has a little bit more freedom to get more creative in his looks, to get more creative in the way that he attacks defenses. So I think overall, and you see the Colts are a team with a pretty shaky run defense to this point in the season. And we're 6 games in, so you probably are what you're going to be for the year at this point. So I think that the Dolphins are in a very good position to take advantage of that still. And again, I'm looking at this offense once Tua comes back, with a full running back room, with Jonnu Smith more integrated into the offense. And I'm liking what I'm seeing there, as long as Mike McDaniel kind of keeps in some of these elements that we saw, last week in New England going forward with him. So as far as the running back position goes, I'm really good with where it is. Side note, Cleveland is selling pieces off. If they're willing to part with a Nick Chubb for like a 6th round pick, I'm all for it. I'm just putting it out there.
Who do you remove to make room for that, though, Eric?
Jeff Wilson.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah.
I mean, because could you imagine those short yardage situations with Nick Chubb? Not going to have problems at that point.
I mean, I kind of like the whole Alec Ingold thing, but
I do too. It's fun. It is.
He deserves it, man. For all the work that he puts in, he deserves some of the spotlight.
Right, but my thing is, we see what Derrick Henry is doing in Baltimore at age 30.
I knew that was going to happen. Derrick Henry's not human.
Could you imagine Nick Chubb seeing the boxes that teams give Miami, especially when Tua's play? Like, that's the kind of stuff that, and again, this is kind of just fantasy land here. So, just
Fantasyland would have been signing Derrick Henry, which I've been screaming about every single time there was an opportunity. Give me Derrick Henry. Like the Dalvin Cook stuff. I remember from last year, Dalvin Cook was the guy, right? He was the one we were all like, what a fascinating concept. I would love to have Dalvin Cook. Like I was interested in Dalvin Cook. He apparently wanted to come to Miami. I would think he still has some gas in the tank. I was wrong on that, retroactively speaking. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. But Derrick Henry, though, that man, I don't care how much tread this guy has on his tires. He just doesn't stop. He doesn't stop. Like Baltimore is literally doing exactly what Tennessee did. They're running him into the ground, and it's working. Lamar Jackson doesn't have to play quarterback. Derrick Henry can just run.
Are we gonna have to? Man, listen, Derrick Henry is an all-time runner. He is. But and I don't know what Nick Chubb would look like coming off the injuries. But we're not going to act like that wasn't kind of 1A for best pure runners in the league for like 3 or 4 years in a row there
Statistically speaking,
with
sure.
Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry.
Statistically speaking, yes, I will still take Derrick Henry. You know why? Because Derrick Henry just bowls people over. That's the kind of running back we haven't had in years.
I'm sorry. Isn't Nick Chubb like 6 foot 235? It's not like he's it's not like he's a tiny guy here. Like this is the dude that squats 650 coming off a major knee injury. But I get it.
Indade in the chat is making it a point. Don't trade for injured players.
To be really fair, I'm only talking if like 5th round pick or worse. 5th, 6th, or 7th. That's not I wouldn't do it for anything more than that. And that's where it really gets to fantasy land. But
do the Browns have any good guards that we can swipe up?
Kevin Zeitler might be available.
Like I need a guard. I'm good. Like you said, we're good with the running back room. I want a guard. I want somebody I can plug and play and say, here, fix the Eichenberg problem. And I know, Coach, he's not as bad as we say he is, but that doesn't mean we can't get better at it.
No, I don't disagree with that part. There are certainly better players out there.
So, Fax says I'd trade for Joel Bitonio. I'll let you field that one, Coach.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched Bitonio. I mean, I know that he's got a good reputation. I know he's, certainly has the strength. I don't know what his movement skills look like, but we talk about continuity all the time, and I know that people don't want to hear it, but it's not a simple, go find somebody on the street or go find somebody in another scheme and drop them in here and it's instantly better. If we were talking about somebody from, that's running a Shanahan type offense, like if we were looking to grab somebody from the 49ers or the Rams or the Packers, then I think that would be a more realistic option. If there are players there who are on the trade block that would be upgrades, I think that would be a more realistic plug and play type thing. But if you're going, completely outside of the scheme and trying to get somebody to be able to step in and be able to do the things that are asked in the scheme and able to assimilate themselves with the players that are on this, I think that there would be, some growing pains that I'm not sure if the Dolphins can afford right now up front, especially considering that things did start to gel in this last week. It's not like the Dolphins are, 4-2 right now and have that room to falter. I feel like going out and getting a lineman right now could possibly end up with that adjustment period we've talked with everything else and end up making things worse than what it is right now.
The reason I can't really agree with that, as like I understand the continuity aspect of it, but you could also make that argument that Isaiah Wynn, when he comes back, he hasn't had any time to practice with the team. Does adding him in there make things worse? Clearly, he was the better player when he was healthy last season in the same scheme. So in that regard, that's why I say at some point, talent just wins. Like just having a better person is better than having a guy who knows the scheme but is not great versus somebody who is learning the scheme but is naturally a good player.
But Wynn has also been here. Wynn knows all of the line calls. We look at some of the protection breakdowns we've had. Every time that they're running these zone schemes, there are different types of combinations that they are calling, communicating verbally, and those are different than what other type of schemes use. So Isaiah Wynn, you're right, there would be a adjustment period from a chemistry in terms of the combination blocks and knowing when to leave, when to stay, when to pass stuff off. There would be an adjustment period there. But in terms of a vocabulary and understanding the different protections, the different calls that are made, you wouldn't have that same type of adjustment with Wynn coming back into the lineup as you would somebody being fresh in the door.
All right. We got about 20 more minutes to go before we have to call this a show. So we're going to very quickly pivot. We want to talk about the other sponsor for this show, our good friends over at Underdog Fantasy for the 3 yards per carry show.
Let me tell you about Underdog Fantasy. It's the greatest time of year again. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player stats, for example, touchdowns, passing yards, and more. Do what I do and make Mondays and Thursday nights much more interesting. Making picks on Underdogs is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with the promo code 3yards. That's the number 3 yards. And Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code 3 yards, the number 3 yards, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna continue on with this discussion about the Indianapolis Colts game that we're facing. So not Coach Eric, the other Eric. It's so hard to just say Eric. Eric W. So of all the things that we've talked about here, we talked about the quarterback situation, we talked about running back. What is the main thing that you're hoping you'll see against the Indianapolis Colts on offense, on defense, whatever is the number one priority in your mind leading up to this game?
So there's a couple things. Number one, I think that the Dolphins are in a unique position defensively to where I don't want to say losing Jalen Phillips does not hurt them in this game at all. It certainly does. But the pass rush is going to have to play a little bit differently against Anthony Richardson in a way that really it's kind of just, be disciplined to make sure that he doesn't leak out. And I think that you can accomplish that with an Emmanuel Ogbah and a Chop. Robinson worries me a little bit more off the edge there just because he's kind of got that, golden retriever rookie thing about him to where, he wants to make plays and he's got a lot of energy on the field, but maybe that comes at the cost of a little bit of discipline occasionally. But I think really what I want to see from this game is I want to see another step in the offensive evolution. So I think with Tyler Huntley, we've seen a steady progression. Number one, you see McDaniel using the middle of the field a little bit more, kind of some of those quick ins off of play action. The next thing for Tyler Huntley is to, and he doesn't even have to do it consistently, really, is to hit on one of those deep balls with a Tyreek. That's kind of the next step that I want to see taken is, okay, you've integrated the short, you've integrated the intermediate. Now let's see you attack all the way downfield, take the top off the defense a little bit. Hopefully more timing with Tyreek and Waddle over the bye week allows for some of that. Because this is a Colts defense that you can hurt with the run. And if you can do it long enough and you can make it painful enough, maybe, just maybe, they'll allow the safeties to creep up a little bit, especially considering it's Tyler Huntley. They might think, oh, it's Tyler Huntley back there. We don't necessarily have to worry as much about the top getting taken off here. And so I think that's going to be the big thing this week is, can Tyler Huntley make defenses pay when they do cheat up a little bit in the deep game?
I'll say this. Tyler Huntley makes me nervous when he goes deep. Those, we want to talk about Tua's lack of arm strength. Tyler Huntley throws balloons, man. Like those are like ducks that the Duck Dynasty folks have already shot out of the sky. Like they didn't even, he threw it and was already dead. So I don't know what it is about him. Like his deep balls just are not good. Like that, he makes me nervous with stuff like that. But I agree that that's an element of the offense that's been lost ever since Tua left, and that's something that I really feel like we're going to have to get back. Otherwise, the whole offense functions on deep playability. It functions on the idea that Tyreek is going to break free at some point, and he's going to blow this game wide open, basically making it so that the defense has to account for him for the rest of the game, opening up everything else. So the adjustment that McDaniel made when they played New England and they decided to run the football all day, that was very refreshing. Obviously, he made his adjustment. Hopefully he sticks to it. And during the bye week, he didn't just revert back to his old self. I'm hoping that that is the case. To your point, Eric, I actually did look up the Indianapolis Colts and their rushing defense. Out of all 32 teams in the NFL, and this is just per Pro Football Reference and their generalized statistics, of all 32 teams in the NFL, Indianapolis ranks in rushing defense 32. They are the worst of all time in the season so far. They are the worst. So if McDaniel does not give Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright and whoever else happens to be running back like 20 carries each in this upcoming game, I'm going to have a problem, because you've already seen the weakness. It's right there. The only way that they can shore up that weakness is if they shove 7 in the box. And at that point, you can just let Huntley throw those ducks. Somebody's going to catch it, and it's probably going to be somebody on Miami because there's just too many guys out there. So now, Coach Eric, what are your main priorities for Miami against the Colts this upcoming week? Obviously, we gotta come away with a win if we want the season to still have some hope to it. We got to come out of this Tua-less section of the season at least with an even score.
Yeah, I agree with what Eric said as far as being able to hit the deep shots. And it's not that we're looking for Tyler Huntley to be able to, throw a 30, 40-yard, air pass that is basically a long handoff the way that Tua would do into deep coverage. It's just that, when those opportunities do present themselves, and they will, that Tyreek or Jalen Waddle or, maybe Devon Achane on a wheel route is just running wide open, we've got to be able to hit that. And he does have the arm strength, kind of similar to Tua in the sense that, if they're throwing off platform, they don't have great arm strength, but Huntley showed the ability to get the ball out there. Like, I feel like Huntley can get, a 45, 50 air yard ball out there to a Tyreek when he's there. But, when those guys are 5-10 yards past the defense, those just have to be balls that we're able to complete. And in terms of setting that up, same thing you guys are saying, we have to be able to run the ball. Like, if this game is going to be on Tyler Huntley, we're going to lose the game. I like what they've done with Huntley. I like the fact that McDaniel has adjusted to the strengths of Tyler Huntley, has simplified the game, and hopefully there's a little more complexity to it. Hopefully there's a little more timing since Huntley has been in there longer, but that still all has to revolve around the run game. You just listed the numbers for the Colts in the run defense. There's no reason at all not to come out here and not to have 35, 40 carries in this game combined. I would like to see them continue to stick with the inside stuff. I still don't have faith in our tight ends being able to block on the edge to really be able to run the outside zone the way that McDaniel would want to. But against the Patriots, they really showed the ability to stick to running the ball inside. They've shown the ability to run the ball inside all this season, but against the Patriots, they finally showed the commitment to sticking to doing that. And that's what I hope that we see out of it as well this week. As far as defensively, going to need another strong game from the defense. This isn't a game that we're going to be able to get into a shootout with, which I really don't expect out of either Flacco or Richardson, unless, Richardson starts, running wild and throwing crazy stuff with guys, broken coverages and stuff like that, because we can't contain a mobile quarterback. But I think the defense will be able to do that. So hopefully the defense can do that. And especially if we have Richardson, that presents the opportunity for a game-changing play defensively. I don't think that Flacco is going to give us as much of that opportunity. He's going to protect the ball, quick throws, understanding the coverage is better. But if Anthony Richardson's playing, then that presents the opportunity for the defense to confuse him, maybe get him to throw an ill-advised pass, maybe gets him to scramble and expose the ball a little bit. So, hopefully the defense can come up with some big plays and we can run the ball and get out to an early lead and, play with a lead in this game and not be trying to play from behind.
So we're going to go ahead and address some of the comments. There's like a whole discussion being had right now between Indade and JMill845 in the YouTube comments right now. And literally, as we're talking about the Indianapolis Colts game and the Miami Dolphins strategy going into it, right now it's just a fire Chris Grier discussion happening basically in the chat right now. So I guess we'll go ahead and address it. Listen, I'll go ahead and I'll let you guys do it because I feel like I've made my point about Chris Grier today. Eric with a W, your overall thoughts on Chris Grier right now, his overall performance, because there have been points made in the chat talking about how Chris Grier has basically been here for over a decade and Miami still has not won any playoff games, no matter what the roster construction has been, no matter who the head coach has been, no matter what they've done, it just hasn't worked. But on the same time, there have been a lot of moves made that we have applauded and lauded him and said, this is something incredible. I don't know how he managed to pull this off. We're very excited for it. And then it just kind of falls apart. But I want to go ahead and I'll get your thoughts on Chris Grier overall right now.
So there's actually a first comment that I want to get into first. And it's a little bit more relevant just to the game here. And then I will address the Chris Grier stuff. But this one here, to be fair, the Dolphins were not leading for a majority of the game against the Patriots. And that was a question from J Mill asking, do you think Mike McDaniel stuck with the run because the Dolphins had a lead? They didn't really have a lead for a good portion of the game. It was after the end of the first half, they were trailing. They didn't really gain that lead until, I believe, late third quarter, maybe even early fourth. So I think what you look at there is I think that there was a genuine step taken by Mike McDaniel there in terms of the discipline in the play calling. As far as the Chris Grier stuff goes, as much as I have my thoughts on Chris Grier, certainly, I think he's kind of emblematic of this Dolphins team as a whole. He really has built, this Dolphins team is been Chris Grier in a nutshell. It's really been the Dolphins under Stephen Ross in a nutshell. And that's not to say that Stephen Ross is a bad owner. I think Stephen Ross is really one of the best owners in all of pro sports. When you look at the investment that he's put into the Dolphins, when you look at the investment into the stadium and things like that, I just think he's been, unfortunately, just hasn't found the right football people to put around him. But I think that he puts his resources and he's got his heart in the right place. As far as Chris Grier goes, it's a lot of sizzle with questionable substance. He'll go out and he'll get the big move. But when it's time to get a backup quarterback, he just kind of forgets about that. There's just a little bit too much focus on the shiny object with a guy like Grier for my tastes. And it's kind of been like that for the Dolphins. I can't imagine how many times have the Dolphins won the offseason in the last 20 years? It feels like the Dolphins win the offseason almost every season, going back the last 10, 15 years. I remember the Mike Wallace. I remember the Ndamukong Suh and those moves. Brandon Marshall. This is just what the Dolphins have done. And so, I think that if they did decide to move on and look for another GM at the end of this season, and I don't know what the rest of the season is going to look like, I'll at least give him the benefit of the doubt of letting the season play out. I kind of think that they keep things where they are and just kind of let the chips fall where they may is really how I would let things play out. But if it doesn't go well, I think it's more than fair to look at a Chris Greer and say, you know, this was you made the decision to go all in. You know, you there's only two things that happen there. You either win big or you lose big. And if the season doesn't go right, you know, he made his gamble. So that's kind of how I feel about that. But you know, I'm going to focus on the in-season stuff while the season is still alive for the Dolphins.
Coach Eric, we'll wrap this up with you.
Yeah. So I saw the comment in the chat earlier about Chris Greer catering to his coaches, and I do think that's a real thing. And I've said before that, you know, the whole backup quarterback situation thing, I think was more of a McDaniel thing than a Greer thing. When you have a quarterback that's a coach that is an offensive minded coach, you know, I feel like if he told Greer that he was okay with Skylar Thompson being the backup quarterback, which obviously was the wrong choice, that Chris Greer, that's not something that he's going to push back on. And at the same time, you know, if McDaniel was going to Greer and saying, you know, Skylar Thompson just doesn't have it, I don't think that would be a situation that Greer would say, well, you know, live with it. So I do think that Greer, you know, really caters to what the head coach wants. And there's good and bad to that. I do think that at times you have to, you know, if your GM is the top of the executive branch in terms of your football operations, then that GM has to have the ability to tell a coach, look, you're not getting what you want. Here's what you're getting. I don't know how much of that happens. And the flip side of that is that, you know, if you want the coach to be the one that's making those type of decisions and you want the GM to be the one that's accommodating that, then you have to hit on the head coach. And he didn't do that with Gase. He, you know, from a coaching perspective, might have from Flores. From a personal perspective, you know, clearly him and Greer didn't get along, and that's the kind of relationships that you have to have between a GM and a head coach. And I think that Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer have that part right, that they are on the same page in terms of what they want to do. Now, whether that's the best thing long term, you know, that's hard to say. I think that they were really comfortable with where they are with Stephen Ross. And to Eric's point, I think that Stephen Ross wants to do the right thing. He always seems to do what I think we could all argue that Stephen Ross is doing what he thinks is the right thing. Whether it is or not may not be correct. But he's got two guys in there that are getting along, that feel comfortable. And I feel like when, you know, you had the draft picks of Chop Robinson and Patrick Paul to lead off your draft, those are picks by guys that feel comfortable in their roles. In terms of what it means for the offseason, you know, I've said before that if they're going to get rid of Chris Greer, then get rid of McDaniel, blow it all up. Don't do a half-assed rebuild again where we're keeping McDaniel and trying to bring another GM in. But that's a conversation for another week for sure. You know, I found it interesting that during the bye week press conferences, it seems that the message that they're trying to get through to the players is be 1-0 this week. You know, in previous weeks, you heard guys like Calais Campbell talking about, you know, bad teams don't, or good teams don't lose 2 games in a row, and kind of heard a little more talk of stuff in the future. It seems like 3 or 4 times in the press conferences I heard that players and coaches are saying, you know, our goal is to be 1-0 this week. So kind of taking that same approach as well, not trying to look too far into the future right now. You know, maybe that changes a little bit if they come out and don't beat Indianapolis, because 2-4 is a lot different than 3-3. But that's kind of where I am with that stuff right now.
You're muted, Lewis.
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry. It's we're gonna go ahead and end it here. As always, we appreciate everybody in the comments. Us, the Pulse of Fins Nation, because you guys are really what the show is all about. Yeah, we talk, but at the end of the day, we always want to be able to bring it back to you guys. So thank you all once again for joining us. Thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring. Thank you to, of course, jerseys305.com. We have that promo code 5. You want to get 10% off of your order whenever you get some of that sweet vintage memorabilia. If you're a Hurricanes fan, you're eating good this year. That's all I'm gonna say. So that might as well go and check and see what you can do with that. So once again, also discord.gg/onlyfins. That is the 3 yards per carry official Discord server. This is where you go on game days when you want to be able to talk to people that are not necessarily going to just chew you a new what over the fact that your opinions may or may not suck. So it's always a great place to go if you're needing somebody to just chill and watch the game with, just your fellow Dolphins fans in a vetted area. So that's going to be it. We will see you all next week for another episode of Pulse of Fins Nation.
Don't let anyone say that we are not a show for the people.
Yeah. Last comment. Jay Mills says, "Thanks for the Fire Greer talk." Yes, we are. This is truly Pulse of Fins Nation, not Pulse of Lewis Nation or Coach Eric Nation or Eric Wiedeke Nation. This is what you guys want to talk about. We may not agree with you, but we'll talk about what you want us to talk about. All right. That's going to be it. Good night, everybody.